Hello Tech Pros, episode 244.
There is no such thing as a great idea by itself. It can be just a hypothesis that this idea can be great, but you actually need to have real data to tell if the idea is great or not.
Welcome to the podcast where we explore the opportunities, challenges, and anxieties that technical professionals and techpreneurs face when building their career, building their products, and building their business. This show is about the people behind technology and the mindsets and skill sets they developed that led to their success. You can learn more about this podcast and our guests at hellotechpros.com and about overcoming social anxiety at anxietynerd.com. All right, let's get started. Hello Tech Pros, this is Chad Bostic, and I'm excited to introduce our featured guest today, Dmitri Saveliev. Happy Thursday, Dmitri.
Yeah, happy Thursday, Chad. Thanks for having me on your show.
You bet, man. I'm so excited to have you. And, we prepped like a lot of time right before the show, and I told you, about 3 or 4 times that we're going to pretend that today is Thursday, because not to let our audience know, but today's actually not Thursday. We recorded off days. And then right when we started, I almost told myself, happy Wednesday. So it's the struggle of being a podcaster and the time machine that I have to work with of every day recording a new episode and not knowing which day I'm going to be recording it. Hashtag podcaster problems. But we're not worried about that, Dmitri, because you are a startup veteran with an extensive Silicon Valley background. Dmitri's experience in developing banking software for Fortune 500 companies has prepared him to lead a venture of his own, ServiceWhale. Derived from his own personal frustrating experience shopping for a heating and cooling system for his home in Princeton, New Jersey, Dmitri founded ServiceWhale in an effort to create a true market for home improvement shopping where pricing is easily obtainable and experience is similar to that of how consumers shop for most products and services online. And Dmitri, we got the opportunity very recently in the last few weeks to talk to your buddy, your colleague, Alex Rubinchik. Alex came on a Sunday episode. So for our audience, if you guys have not checked out that episode, it's episode 238. So if you go to hellotechpros.com/238, it is the philosophy and steps to managing your internal dialogue. Alex and I had a great time talking about the biggest enemy in your life is your internal dialogue. For me, it was, struggling with this imposter syndrome and social anxiety disorder. Alex had some other issues that he's dealt with over his life and his career. And then, how technology and information can potentially mislead us and derail our mindset. And Alex shared with us some activities that can help your health and education and social health all at the same time. I had a great time talking to Alex. But in the middle of that conversation, Alex said, you know what, I work for ServiceWhale. It's an amazing organization. And he kind of shared a little bit about the organization that you guys have put together. And I said, dude, we got to bring back somebody from your company to talk about entrepreneurship or technology or so forth. And he said, you have to meet Dmitri. Dmitri is amazing. You got to get him on your show. And so here we are, Dmitri, just a few weeks later. And I want to thank you, first of all, for following Alex up and joining me on the show today. To get us started, man, where did ServiceWhale come from? If you want to just kind of share a little bit of that startup story.
Yeah. Thanks again for having me, Chad. And I do appreciate the compliments. Thanks a lot. You're right. I'm with ServiceWhale. ServiceWhale was started back in 2014, as you mentioned, as a result of my own frustrating homeowner experience. When I was shopping for several major projects for the home which I recently built. So I realized, even though now there are a lot of online services, a lot of ways which can help you to find contractors whenever you have to do any major project, for example, replacing your cooling heating system or replacing a roof, even though it's easy actually to get several contacts of contractors, the process is still very painful because you actually need to invite all of these contractors into your house to do an estimate. Basically to get 3, 4, 5 numbers and even to realize if you can afford this project or not, you need to spend probably a day or even two of your life. Sometimes you need to take day off at work to do that. Sometimes you need to spend like one of your weekend days instead of spending them with your family and kids. So it's a long and not very pleasant process. At the same time, even after you invited these contractors into your home, you still cannot be sure that you got a good proposal, because there is a huge pricing spread. As many people know, contractor prices can range anywhere from X to 2X for exactly the same service and same quality of service. So even after you have invited several contractors, still there is a great chance there is like another guy, another great contractor with a great reputation, great quality of work, like 10 miles away from you, who would love to do it for maybe like 50% of what you've been quoted. So it's really a matter of luck whether you can find that guy or not, or he can find you or not. So we realized at that point that there is no true market for home improvement, because an essential feature, essential characteristic of every market is obviously availability of instant transparent pricing, right? Mm-hmm. If you, for example, want to shop for like stocks, if you want to buy like one share of Google, you don't invite anybody into your house, right? You know where exactly to find out how much it would cost you. Likewise, if you're shopping for like an appliance or a TV for your home, you can go online, you can easily find like all options available to you, and there is no way you would overpay like twice as much for a TV if you can buy it like for $1,000. Likewise, almost for everything in our lives, if you're shopping for an airplane ticket, you can go to like Expedia or Kayak or a lot of other services, and you actually see the price, right? It's not like tentative price. It's actually the price, right? So we got very used to this kind of shopping, painless online shopping, which we can do like anytime, anywhere, for almost everything. But somehow home services happens to be an exception, and nobody was questioning it. So we actually decided to question it, because like a common assumption was that, well, it's so complex. These guys needs to come over. They do have some black magic, some sacred knowledge they need to use to give you a number. But we decided to question that assumption, and we realized that in fact, in many cases for many big ticket services, like the ones which I mentioned, like HVAC replacement or roofing replacement, it's not that difficult to do. You can do it remotely, and moreover, you can do it automatically. You can calculate the price like without actually involving any attention from the contractor. So we worked with several domain experts just to nail down for each specific service what are these most important parameters which really matter for the price. Out of like 100 possible parameters, which are the 10 which really matter to calculate a price, and the rest could be ignored. And that's how ServiceWhale was conceived and born. After we realized that it's actually possible to create an experience very very familiar for everybody, like true e-commerce experience, with upfront pricing for major big ticket home services.
Yeah, dude, I feel you. That's so complicated. As you said, there's 100 different parameters, and what you found out, there's only 10 of them that really matter to calculate the price. But, to take a step back, for our audience and for me, first of all, when we talk about big ticket home improvement items, it's scalable, right? So different people have different pain points, or different people have different realizations of what big means to them. So for me personally, I've always kind of struggled with a little bit of DIY anxiety. So anytime I have to go to the DIY hardware store and buy like a new tool thingy and a new whatever. My wife wants me to do things because she finds these awesome little home projects on Pinterest, and I start working on them. I get all so stressed out because I don't know what I'm doing. I have to follow YouTube videos, and the tools that they're using are super advanced, and I don't have those kind of tools, and I end up doing in my opinion, a poor, crappy job. And so I want to find a contractor to just do anything, like hang a ceiling fan or whatever. But what you're talking about here are big ticket things like, hey, I need to completely redo my roof, or I need to completely reinstall a new HVAC system, air conditioning system. And that is like not just like a thing that you could do overnight, right? You're going to probably have to bring a whole team, a whole crew of individuals in to work on this big renovation, this big work that's going on. And so it's not something that you're going to take lightly. It's not like, oh, well, I'm out $100 and no big deal. I just, learn my lesson and go about it. No, we're talking about tens of thousands of dollars, potentially up to hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on the project and the home. That's a lot of money. These are big tickets. These are important problems, and there's a whole lot of project management to go into it. So for our audience, they may be thinking, you know what, this sounds a little bit like an entrepreneurship Saturday, because we're talking about how Dmitri got this business started. Just want to give complete transparency. We had talked offline about having Dmitri on a Saturday show to talk about entrepreneurship, and so I wanted to give him the opportunity to do that. But those episodes are so popular, Dmitri, that it was going to be like way into February, March before we could get you on. I was like, dude, I want to get Dmitri on sooner than that. So we're here to talk about the technology behind your business. First of all, thank you for sharing that startup story. So can you share a little bit about the tech behind ServiceWhale? So you built this company. Did you go like and find off-the-shelf technology to run all the back-end processes for your company, or was ServiceWhale, the technology behind it, built from the ground up?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say that the beauty of today's technology is that there are a lot of building blocks nowadays which you can actually reuse, right? Comparing to what was the beginning, like back in the dot-com era, like late 90s, early 2000s. You had to build pretty much everything from scratch, right? Nowadays, like it's this service-oriented, component-oriented, thinking in the industry, which is actually very, very useful, right? Because a lot of services are built like directly with APIs, right? Which is helping a lot. For example, one of many services which we use to build ServiceWhale is obviously payment processing, right? So there are like a lot of well-known old payment gateways. There are a lot of newer ones which built with the developers in mind. So we specifically use Stripe, and we actually were amazed how easy it is to implement payments with Stripe, because it was built with this reuse in mind. And likewise, we do use a lot of other stuff, both like on the development side, something which is visible to the user and something which is not visible to the user, which helped us a lot, so that we could focus only on what is core for us. I can give you a few examples. We use Olark for online support, which was again very easy to integrate, and it's a great service. We also use a lot of tools for actually optimize the UX, right? Now it's like with any startup, it's critical to like make sure the user experience is like smooth and flawless, and it's great to see where your users are struggling, right? Mm-hmm. Like which specific element makes them confused or makes them like think twice. And again, thanks to the services we can plug in, we can do that. So we can monitor We can monitor and watch sessions, and that actually helps a lot.
Cool. So we've got, sounds like you've really built your business from a dynamic list of libraries and frameworks that are off the shelf, as opposed to saying, okay, we're going to build a tech company from the ground up, therefore we need to build the tech from the ground up. You really went out and looked for, okay, here are different components of our business. We're going to need a payment processor. We're going to need a customer support, right? We're going to need user interface, structures and frameworks and so forth. And so instead of building each one of those yourself, you went out and looked for components, you looked for APIs and services that were already existing in the marketplace, and then came back into the ServiceWhale headquarters and then stitched them all together, right? And created integrations between all these different components instead of building them all yourself.
Yeah, absolutely correct. So whenever we have any task, we first look if this was already implemented by somebody, so that we don't reinvent the wheel and can focus on what is core to our business.
Yeah, I see so many tech companies, unfortunately, and great engineers, software engineers, falling into the trap of wanting to build a better mousetrap, right? And so, so many people run down the rabbit holes of, they've got their big whiteboards and all the diagrams of, we need this module and this module and this module, this module, and then they run off and start building, instead of doing that little bit of research like you talked about, a little bit of, what is out there. And does something already exist that we can integrate in that's going to just work, instead of rebuilding everything from scratch? How much time do you think it's saved you, time and money and effort has saved you by using these components that are already out there instead of building them all yourself?
Yeah, actually, I agree completely with your first point. I saw myself a lot of great developers who are just not excited about using somebody else's framework, right? It's a lot more exciting for them to develop something from scratch, and it's critical to have a different mindset. I would say we have saved at least one. Maybe between 1 and 1.5 person years just by using these frameworks and ready-to-use services instead of developing them from scratch. So it helped us a lot, definitely.
Wow, that's amazing. A year to a year and a half in people years, just by using off-the-shelf components instead of building it all yourself. And yeah, you're right, man. Some developers, myself included back in the day, not so much anymore, but developers are a lot like authors, right? A lot like novelists, where we want to craft a unique story. We want to make something original that's really compelling and really engaging and really like hits all the emotional bells and whistles, as including all the technical bells and whistles that we want to put in there. But you know what? At the end of the day, we're trying to build a business. We're trying to get something accomplished. We're trying to be productive with the time that we have. And sometimes we need to just say, hey, it's not about building it from scratch, not about inventing a new wheel or a better mousetrap. It's about furthering our business goals and achieving our business goals by integrating things together. So how big is your technical team there at ServiceWhale?
Our team is 7 people right now, and they're all based in Russia. Part of the team is based in Moscow, and we also have few team members in other cities of Russia. So I can say that ServiceWhale is working around the clock, because we are scattered a lot across several time zones, from Siberia to European part of Russia to the east coast of the US to California. So. Yeah.
How many time zones was that?
I would say 4 or 5 time zones.
Wow.
We have people in, right. Mm-hmm.
That's crazy. So what is it like to manage? So kind of moving away from the technology and more into the leadership style of the company. Like, how do you bring all 7 of these people, the technical people, together to build this product when you're across so many different time zones and so many different countries and locations?
Right. You are right. It's definitely a challenge. But nowadays, like we all believe, like ServiceWhale team, we all believe that it's actually not necessary to be like for everybody to be in the same office, especially when it comes to the development team, right? A lot of online collaboration tools are available. Skype is always there, as well as other ways to connect. And the way we actually make sure everybody is productive is that we have a results-oriented culture in our team, right? So it's not the process which matters, right? We have specific deliverables, specific milestones, specific dates. Of course, it is always a challenge to estimate the effort right, but we managed to do it, quite well, I would say. And then we actually see, of course, our team is great, but we made some mistakes in the process too. Not everybody fit our team, and we did have some team members who just didn't perform in our environment. Mm-hmm. And in case of developers, it's actually quite easy to see the results, right? So every day you see how much code every developer checked in, right? So we require actually everybody to check in at the end of the day, even if it is development branch, even if certain functionality is not ready yet. So it's very easy to track progress. So we also have obviously a ticket system, and it's we are very elaborate in that. Everything that we have is going through ticket system. So again, it's very easy to measure performance of every team member. Usually we don't have any issues like that. Everybody shares, same culture. Everybody shares the excitement about, our business idea, our intention to do something differently to make a difference in this home improvement shopping space. Everybody is motivated, but we do have this safety net. If a certain team members just doesn't fit our culture, it becomes apparent very quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a lot easier nowadays to really tell the productivity of a developer, at least from the standpoint of weeding out the people who aren't pulling their weight, right? Weeding out the people who aren't doing their jobs. I've worked with really, really big organizations, Fortune 100 organizations in the past, where 10, 15 years ago, it was pretty easy for some people to just kind of punch the clock and come into the office and just kind of go to the meetings and sit at the computer all day, but not actually do anything and to not be held accountable for weeks or months on end, because it was really hard for the management team to really look in and say, hey, what are you guys actually doing? It would come down to when you get to a milestone, when you want to show and tell the product, and then it's, oh, we're behind schedule. I've heard a lot of that. But nowadays, hey, everybody's connected to the source code repository. Everybody sees the reports from the sprint planning and so forth. Very, very easy to see the productivity of the team and on are people making progress, or are they not? So, Dmitri, usually on these episodes, on these tech episodes, we talk about the past, present, future of tech. I think this is a very interesting area that you're in. And I've had a lot of experience and a lot of questions in the past with a lot of the software development methodologies, a lot of the technical engineering methodologies, specifically like the language that we use about how we build things, like we have the architecture, design principles, our planning meetings are fashioned from the construction industry, right? So when you talk about architecting a building versus architecting code, or designing your user interface as opposed to designing, how a room is laid out or how a building is built. So maybe we could talk about the differences and the similarities between building a tech company and doing a huge remodel on one of these big projects in just a moment. But first, we'll take a quick break and thank our sponsors. This episode of Hello Tech Pros is sponsored by you, the audience. Instead of looking for new corporate sponsors, I've decided to adopt a pay-per-value model. What that means is you decide on how much I get paid. If you're just browsing and have yet to get value out of the show, don't feel obligated to pay a darn thing. However, if this podcast does its intended job of helping you build your career, build your products, or build your business, consider becoming a sponsor on Patreon. Pick the level of recurring donation that matches the level of value you get out of this show, or make a one-time sponsorship for that big aha moment that have helped turn things around for you. Become a sponsor today at patreon.com/hellotechpros or visit hellotechpros.com/sponsor. Okay, we're back with Dmitri Saveliev, and we're talking to Dmitri about his business ServiceWhale. Dmitri is the founder of ServiceWhale, who is a company that enables people to do really big ticket, like reconstruction, remodeling projects like cooling and heating, or replace a roof on their house, really big ticket items. As easily as you're doing price matching on like Expedia or Kayak and stuff like that. So instead of having 1,000 different contractors come over to your house and interviewing them all, you can just really get an easy, one-stop shop interface to see, what's it going to take and what contractors are out there and who can do these type of jobs in my area and what are their quotes for really just the 10 parameters that are going to make the big difference on how to calculate that price. So Dmitri has built this business he's got 7 developers all across 5 different time zones across Russia and the United States and Ukraine. And it's just amazing how we can build these businesses, build this technology together by, as you said at the beginning, using these plug and play, these APIs, these foundations, these toolkits that are off the shelf these days, instead of building it all ourselves. So if we take that paradigm, if we take that model back to the housing, like remodeling or construction paradigms that we talk about, what are, in your opinion, like some of the similarities and then some of the differences between doing a construction of a house or remodel of a house and then the construction or remodel of your software platforms?
Right. Yeah, I think it's a very good analogy, definitely, because obviously, construction industry has been around for thousands of years, right? Mm-hmm. And it accumulated and cultivated a lot of great practices over that period of time. So it's relatively streamlined, even though we all know there are still a lot of issues in that industry, like budget overruns and schedule overruns. Recently, we visited Boston and we recalled the Big Dig project, when clearly the budget and schedule overrun was several times exceeding the initial estimate, and unfortunately, it became clear only about the time when the project was supposed to be over. So as a result of that, I guess construction industry and project management in general, they came up with this, earned value concept, which actually helps to track intermediate progress. When it comes to software development, I could witness myself, there was like a huge evolution in the methodology, in the way people approach software development since I started developing software, which was back when I was in high school. So I can say one of the things, for example, which has changed, right? Like today versus late 90s, early 2000s. Back then, everybody was very focused on few ideas, which now don't seem to be very important anymore. I remember there was a huge hype about object orientation, right? Mm-hmm. Back in the late 90s, again, early 2000s, right? it was almost like, I don't know, religion, right? If you like don't follow the principles of user orientation, object orientation, I don't know, if you like don't follow like patterns, like, should be like single inheritance always as opposed to multiple inheritance, you are not a good developer, right? You are troublesome. And it was like sort of assumed and taken for granted that this religious following of object orientation was really helping to build easily maintainable code. And what was also very common, right, that people, when designing software, they like analyze it to death, right? As a result, sometimes schedule was sacrificed just for the sake of purity, right? Just for the sake of proper internal design. A lot of times, like development teams spend a lot of time, like, I don't know, instrumenting the system and their, I don't know, frameworks with all possible future use cases, even before such a requirement was brought up, right? So a lot went into this religious following of some beliefs. Then it has changed, I believe, with the invention of extreme programming, when somebody said, okay, it's fine to come up with something really fast and run it by the user, right? And it's fine not to have it like perfectly organized, perfectly architected, perfectly designed. If it's really important, you will have time to redo it later, right? And that actually evolved into what is known as like Scrum nowadays. Mm-hmm. And this whole new like methodology, new philosophy of software development, I think it's a lot more aligned with real world businesses, right? Because most of the times software is not developed just for the sake of it, right? It's developed to enable some business, especially when it comes, of course, to online services. And as always with businesses, time to market is critical, right? And as always with businesses, you never know what's around the corner, right? You don't know what is important tomorrow, what's not important tomorrow. You will find out by exploring, right? You will find out by talking to your customers, by experimenting. So I think the current methodology is actually a lot better connected and related to the real world, as opposed to 10-15 years ago. And I would say this is not the same with construction business, right? So it's not necessarily speaking about similarities. It's speaking about differences of building a home and building software, right? Because I guess software used to be built in the same way as houses are built. Like you had to have grand master plan in the very beginning, and everything had to be designed and planned for upfront, and then you would just follow the original master plan, right? And it caused a lot of troubles in many cases back then. But now you don't do it anymore, right? It's okay for you, when you have for example, some great new feature in mind, right? It's totally fine to develop just part of it, develop it quick and dirty, without proper structuring and factoring of the code, just to test the concept. Who knows? And very often, after testing it, you may actually discontinue it because there is no positive response. But if actually it sticks, this new feature which you add, you obviously will have a lot of time to generalize it and structure it properly and essentially rebuild it. So I guess something which is not true when you're building a house. Once you have built a house, I think it's very difficult to introduce any significant changes to the original design, unless it's, I don't know, an addition to a house, which is a different story altogether.
Very interesting concept here, Dmitri. I love the concept of it's not anymore about the similarities between software development and architecture, software development and construction. It's really more about the differences between them, right? We have shifted paradigms where, as you said, back in the early days of software development, like take it back to maybe the 70s or 80s, which is kind of like my early days. It was very much, you absolutely had to have very, very rigorous processes in order to get your software developed, right? Because it was so labor intensive to get everything done. And so you need to plan it up front. You need to have a huge team of people working on just their little bits and make sure that all their little bits were integrated together. And then you didn't change anything. Like once you got it working, like it was such a big, monumentous effort in order to build this monolithic system. Now you can't ever change anything. You can't dynamically evolve as the business evolves. You have to build something new. Kind of like construction was back in the early days, right? Where it's just like, hey, we're going to build this castle, and then we might add on an outer wall to the castle, but the inner castle is not really changing. We're not evolving it. But now software development has changed so much through the agile methodologies and through, as you said in the beginning, the modules and the APIs that are available together to pull these components together, that we can really align our technology to the business in real time as the business needs change. And I think you brought up a really excellent point there, that businesses are dynamic. They have to thrive in an evolving world, and we need our software to be able to evolve with it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Cool, man. Well, I could nerd out on this stuff forever, but unfortunately, we've run out of time. Before we go, do you have any final words of wisdom for our audience? And then please share the best way that we can connect with you, and then we'll say goodbye.
Yes, absolutely. I think when you build a startup or when you develop software, right? It doesn't matter. I think it's critical to essentially question every possible assumption or conceptions that you have, right? There is no such thing as a great idea by itself. It can be just a hypothesis that this idea can be great, but you actually need to have real data to tell if the idea is great or not, right? So it's essential to base your conclusions on some kind of data all the time. Another suggestion I had is that it's critical to apply logic and common sense every minute, especially again if you're in a startup environment and there are a lot of unknowns and you're exploring the best, finding the best business model, finding the best solution. It's very easy to spend a lot of cycles, spin your wheels, doing something which is doomed. And in many cases, you already have the data available to you. Maybe you have done something before. You can just analyze it, right? And say, okay, I already did something like that, very similar, but it didn't work. So let's not, spend our time on trying it again, right? It really helps in our case, because just with any startup, we have a lot of ideas, a lot more of ideas than we can digest in 1 year or 2 years. So it's essential to vet and filter these ideas very, very carefully, and again apply logic, common sense, because again a lot of thoughts seem to be great on the first sight, but when you look deeper into them, you may rule out maybe 90% of your ideas right away.
Great stuff, Dmitri. And where can we find you online and find out more about ServiceWhale?
Yeah. ServiceWhale is available obviously at servicewhale.com. That's our website, and please feel free, everybody, to check it out. And if you have any home improvement project, we hope we can help you to save a lot of time and possibly also a lot of money. And you can email me at any time at info@servicewhale.com.
Well, Dmitri, thank you so much for joining me on Hello Tech Pros today. I really value your startup story and coming on and sharing with us about how you started ServiceWhale, as well as the great discussion about the past of software development and the past of technology business development, and how the world has changed and what we need to do to like open our eyes and realize that the world is a different place than it was just a few years ago, and what we can do to build our own successful products and businesses. So thank you for coming on and talking about that.
Yeah, thank you, Chad, for having me. It was a great show, and thanks for the insightful questions.
You're very welcome. Tech Pros, if you ever get anxious about some of this stuff, especially when you are at the office, you're talking to your boss, you're talking to your teammates, and there are differences of opinions on what directions you should go with your technology, right? So you want to try out the latest and greatest thing. Your neighbor to your left, right, wants to stay with the code that is already in place, but maybe refactor it. Your boss wants to change nothing, but to just keep going and not spend those capital investment dollars on changing anything. And so you need to have a discussion about it. Sometimes those discussions on what to do and what decisions need to be made can be very stressful. For me, I stressed out, had a lot of anxiety about these issues, like how to have really tough conversations with my colleagues at work year after year. And it took me a long time to learn how to develop the soft skills I needed in order to perform well in those situations. If you can resonate with that, if you have trouble with anxiety at the office and having those critical conversations, then I invite you to check out my stories on anxiety in the workplace and in life at anxietynerd.com. I am compiling together a whole bunch of stories that I'm writing about these situations in my life and my career, the struggle with social anxiety as well with other anxieties in life and business. And I am compiling those down into a book. And so early next year, I'm going to be releasing a book. I would love to have your feedback on it. Go to anxietynerd.com. You've been listening to Dmitri Saveliev, and I am Chad Bostic. And until next time, do svidanya. See ya. The show notes page for this episode can be found at hellotechpros.com/244. Do you use Slack for team communication? Join the Hello Tech Pros Slack channel at hellotechpros.com/Slack. If this episode helped you out in any way, please leave a review on iTunes and let me know what you thought. iTunes reviews helps our rankings, which helps us grow the Hello Tech Pros podcast to a broader audience, which helps more technical professionals and techpreneurs build their career, build their products, and build their businesses. If you are a subscriber and get repeat value out of this show, consider becoming a sponsor on Patreon. The information on this podcast is free to everyone, but I'm giving you the opportunity to pay for the value you get out of it, starting as little as $1 a month. Pledge your support today at patreon.com/hellotechpros or visit hellotechpros.com/sponsor.